Nine points I'd like to make. First, as noted in the agenda, the task force is comprised of 20 individuals, faculty, students, administrative leaders, representative from the legislature, and representative from business. Second, the work of the task force during the first 6 months was spent extensively looking into the best available research we could find on student success, hearing testimony from leaders within California and throughout the country on what was working and what provided the greatest promise for policy development and for increasing the numbers of students who would succeed in our community colleges. The discussions were substantive, they were vigorous, and it resulted in a draft report which contains 24 recommendations. And the recommendations very quickly fall into about 8 areas: increasing college readiness for incoming students, primarily through collaboration with K-12, which is extremely important, and particularly because K-12 is working on the initiative of Common Core standards at this point. The timing could not be better for the collaboration and activity with them, and I think that represents one of the most important areas. Second is strengthening support for students upon entry. College experience is similar to many experiences individuals have. If they get off to a poor start, if they experience a degree of failure or uncertainty, the likelihood of it not working out is increased. So therefore, what can we provide at the very beginning that is going to help focus, assist the students to make the best choices for themselves and to be prepared as they enter classes? And there are a series of recommendations in that area. Third is providing incentives for successful student behaviors. If students are full-time students, if they're passing and doing well, there should be certain, if you will, priorities for registration and other considerations that are provided, and we're looking at those. Aligning course offerings to try to meet student needs, and this is particularly challenging in some areas. The basic skills, there's such a large need, and there's a somewhat limited capacity given the needs to provide for basic skills and still have a diverse curriculum to meet all of that need. So there's some suggestions in those areas. Improving the educational processes and basic skills. Again, this is capitalizing on a lot of initiatives that are presently occurring within the California community colleges that we have attempted to learn from, and they will be offered primarily as suggestions for local campuses to see if adopting them will work effectively in their local situations. Revitalizing professional development, and particularly in working with faculty and staff on the support that, if you will, students without full preparation need in order to be successful. So professional development in that area. Enabling statewide leadership and increasing coordination among the colleges. Statewide leadership primarily by a stronger chancellor's office and the ability to provide leadership in this critical area. And then the last area of recommendations, aligning resources with student success recommendations. In other words, what initiatives might be funded, where can, in particular, one-time funding be provided that can have a substantial impact for the system as a whole. So I recognize I went through them fast. There's printed material on this, but there are 24 recommendations. They've been thoughtfully derived. Just a little bit about the process we'll be following. 2 days from today, we'll have what I expect will be the last a formal meeting of the task force in concluding with the draft report. That will be followed by what we refer to as a field review. That is exposure to community college groups and individuals throughout the state, at conferences throughout the state, as well as public hearings that would be held. Then there'll be a November review with the Board of Governors. December, the final report will be prepared, and I agree very much with the action expressed at the board retreat, that a special board meeting in December to focus on this topic and this topic only will be beneficial to give the board the final comprehensive review it needs, so that in January, when the final report is submitted for board action, my hope would be that all questions that the board members might have will be answered by the opportunities provided for review. And then the last action that will be taken will follow the formal, assuming for a moment that the board adopts the report, the last action will be a report to the legislature on the findings and recommendations of the Student Success Task Force. My final comment is that I just want to commend the task force members. The seriousness of purpose, the dedication, the diligence that they have had in all of these meetings has been particularly impressive. I think all of them have recognized how critical the work of the task force is in trying to support success throughout the system, and how vital increasing the numbers of students who succeed is to both our credibility and to our effectiveness as a system. And at this point, I'm very confident that the report will be a good report. What is meant by a good report, it'll be a report that will be of value to our colleges in supporting local efforts to increase student success. So that's my report for today.
Thank you. First, I want to thank you, Chairman McDougall, Member Baca, and the Chancellor for your great leadership on this and hard work. As you said, we spent a great deal of time yesterday at our retreat on this and have made some plans. But if any board members have any other questions or wanted to cover any topics that we did not cover yesterday, nope. With that, why don't we go to our public comment?
So, and Jerry had to step out, so if anyone else is completing one of these forms, I ask you if you can bring it to me directly, okay? So the first speaker is Will Bruce, the president, Triple C EOPSA.
Thank you. Chancellor Scott, President Hammelstein, Vice President Perez, board members. My name is Will Bruce, CCC EOPSA president, and I'd like to commend the Student Success Task Force for some of the ideas that are proposed, especially the one about technology, about improving student success with technology, the effective use of technology. And I'm a totally technology guru, and I've created a database at our campus, paperless system, so we can serve more students more efficiently than most EOPS programs throughout the state. And I share that database statewide for free. First of all, I want to remind you of my personal story about how EOPS has brought me.
Excuse me, can you talk into the microphone?
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay, this one?
Can you lower the laptop if
Could
you're
you
not
close
using
the
it?
laptop?
Sure,
Could
sure.
you- thank
Can you roll back my time?
I am going to roll back your time.
Thank you. All right.
I'm the timekeeper.
I live in the cloud, and I love technology, and I live on my iPad, by the way, iPad. First of all, I want to remind you of my personal story about how EOPS brought me, a single father on welfare, unsure of how to do this thing we call college, Unexpectedly, EOPS was there, treating me like family, helping me realize my true potential for more than I felt I was capable. I came to the community college to receive a certificate and get back to work. But because of the mandatory appointments and the intrusive EOPS counseling, they convinced me the only real way out was to continue my education. If it wasn't for the EOPS program, I would not be here today, a successful tax-paying Californian. My son, who grew up in EOPS, is now in college with an associate's degree and working toward a transfer. And he does not qualify for EOPS, but that is what we do. We make success out of our EOPS students so they become the resource for the children, showing them how to navigate college with their own family resources. We help create the next generation of non-eligible EOPS students, which is a good thing. EOPS brings the have-nots up to the levels of, my thing keeps popping up, sorry. Technology works only if you work it. Okay, we create, EOPS brings the have-nots up to the levels of the haves in California. It is a position of the EOPS Association to oppose any kind of flexibility language out there for the EOPS program because it severs our categorical funding from the legislative intent. The low-income, systematic, disempowered students whom we serve are counting on us to use these funds in support of them achieving their educational goal. If even $1 of EOPS is flexed, or if EOPS is placed in a consolidated group of other flexible categorical programs, then the districts are no longer required to ensure that the EOPS dollars are spent accordingly to EOPS Ed Code statutes or our Title V regulations. The integrity of the EOPS services will be lost. EOPS has continued to provide advocacy for our students, EOPS programs, other categorical programs, even the community college system itself. Advocacy provided by EOPS benefits the system as a whole. If EOPS becomes generic, it will go away. We in EOPS often hear comments directed to our students like those students are taking up space in the classrooms and they're not prepared for college. The community colleges are beginning to go down the road of favoring the haves over the have-nots. Are we as a system trying to show success by pushing those students out the door using flexibility as a way to do it? The EOPS Association urges you to do all in your power to ensure the EOPS remains whole and that none of the EOPS categorical funds are flexed to serve non-EOPS purposes for this fiscal year, next fiscal year, and all the fiscal years in the future. Thank you in advance for your concerted effort in our behalf of EOPS protecting us from all proposals that would include EOPS and categorical flexibility. Is there any more time?
Thought?
All right, but I gave Dr. McDougall a letter to invite him to the EOPS conference, and thank you. I hope you come.
Marcus King, EOPS.
Hi. I'm a former EOPS student who would not be a UC student now if not for the EOPS program in my community college that I transferred from. I'm proud to be a product of the EOPS and DSPS programs. I utilized the extra hour of tutoring that cannot be provided by DSPS when I took statistics rather than becoming a statistic. Flexing EOPS funding unfortunately allows districts to flex their muscle and not fund the program as was intended. At UC Davis, where I attend, there's fewer than 3% black students. Most of those students, in my experience, would not be there if not for the EOPS program as well. I'm a single dad of a 9-year-old daughter. The flexing of EOPS funds could jeopardize the opportunities that EOPS helps create for students who would not have them otherwise. I'm a first-generation college student who fears that I might be a last-generation college student as well if EOPS funding is not protected. Thank you.
Thank you. Peter White, President, CSSO Association.
Good afternoon, Mr. President, members of the board, Chancellor Scott, and colleagues from near and far. I'm Peter White, the Vice President of Student Services at San Diego City College, and I serve as the President of the statewide CSSO Association. The draft report that I have seen contains many recommendations that are very much in alignment with what student services professionals and the CSSO believe are model efforts and best practices to increase student success, including requiring orientation of all new college students, requiring students to be assessed for skill levels and placement, requiring students to have and follow an educational plan developed by a counselor, and monitoring students' progress thereafter towards their completion of a degree, certificate, transfer, or other educational goal. The caveat in all this is adequate funding for adequate staffing, including the technology to support increased self-service and online functions and services. Additionally, many of the recommendations related to basic skills assume that there will be sufficient basic skills courses available to students in order for them to meet the requirements of their proposed educational plans. We are also philosophically very much in agreement with a better collaboration with K-12 for enhanced ease of transfer to the baccalaureate level and increased support services for all students, especially low-income and basic skill students. Several of the recommendations, however, raise concerns among the CSSOs and our colleagues in student services at the college. We appear to be creating a sense of double jeopardy for some of our neediest students. If you test or assess low, if you're an immigrant, you will be required to take only basic skills courses, but only for a year. And if you place into lower level courses, you can't receive financial aid because those courses will have now been transferred into the non-credit mode. And there will be a certain limit on the total number of basic skills units that you can complete at all, even though those courses may not be available when you need them. Also, if you're on financial aid, you will be strongly encouraged to enroll on a full-time status, even though full-time enrollment is not the best advice for many of our low-income working students. And another thing, if you're not following your education plan, which may not be current because of the current lack of counseling or the lack of technology for self-service functions, you will lose your priority in gaining the courses you need for your education plan. There are 4 broad issues touched on in the task force's recommendations that don't appear to be addressed directly in the task force report and yet are fundamental. One is funding. How much will all of this cost? Number 2, where will that funding be drawn from? Number 3, what are the implications for local governance, to which the report pledges fealty, along with recommendations to greatly strengthen the Chancellor's office? And finally, a number of these recommendations appear to question the California Community College mission as a whole.
Can we have your final comments, please?
None of those have been fully or directly addressed by the task force, and its recommendations can't be truly implemented or implemented successfully unless either the task force or the board takes those issues on and examines them in detail. Thank you.
Nancy Wright, Triple C EOPSA. Did I say your last name right?
Retes.
Okay.
Welcome to Butte College. My name is Nancy Retes, and I've been a faculty here at Butte for the last 20 years. 18 of those years I've served as an EOPS counselor. I was never an EOPS or EOP student. It was working in the program that has given me the opportunity to see the miracles that this program helps come true. Helping single parents, giving disenfranchised and often unwanted students a second, third, sometimes even a fourth chance. I can't think of any other counseling service here at Butte College that challenges me to use every counseling skill I have ever learned to help my needy students succeed. The possibility that EOPS as a protected categorical funded program may be flexed is very scary to me. Even here at Butte College, where the various administrations have been very supportive of our program, I can't help to feel that the EOPS program would be highly vulnerable if having to compete with other programs to secure funding. Thank you for your time. I'm going to stick to my time because 2 colleagues have already spoken. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day here. And for those of you liking cold beer, I recommend Sierra Nevada in Chico. It's a nice visiting spot for all of our visitors. And here's one of the EOPS students for which I happen to be a counselor to. Thank you.
Thank you. Jonathan Lightman. Back.
Thank you, President Himmelstein, Vice President Perez, Chancellor Scott, and Member McDougall. Jonathan Lightman on behalf of the Faculty Association of California Community Colleges. I think we're aware that there's a lot of potential in this report, and there's a lot of items that we can all coalesce around. The emphasis on assessment, counseling, professional development, alignment with K-12, to name 3. There are a couple of concerns that I'd like to bring to your attention in advance of a formal position of the FAC Board insofar as we are waiting for the final document. The first is that we have not heard mention of the need to increase full-time instructional faculty. Right now, we're dealing with a ratio of 58% of courses in the credit realm taught by full-time faculty, where we know that the goal is 75%. We're aware that this is a cost item, but we do believe that it belongs in the report, that we have to send a message. We have mountains of material, Academic Senate, AAUP, FAC, on the value of full-time faculty, but not only that, or the contribution to full-time faculty to student success. Along those lines, the idea that we would somehow flex part-time office hours and believe that that would contribute to student success is completely counterintuitive. We instead have to figure out how to make the provision of paid office hours by part-time faculty to be part of the student experience, and we have 40,000 part-time faculty members in the community colleges, or at least we did, that would back up that claim. You've heard several speakers from Student Services, and I don't want to repeat what they've said other than to support them, and to suggest that for somehow pitting one group of vulnerable students against another group of vulnerable students before 72 local boards, and for somehow to claim that that would contribute to student success, again, is counterintuitive. We've heard so many student speakers in the legislature say that the existence of silos and to view them as protective and somehow to, not to use the term flexible and inflexible, for somehow we don't want to be inflexible, but that in fact that these silos with their own directors, with their own levels of expertise is exactly what got students through community colleges. And we do need to attend to what the EOPS professionals are saying right here. Finally, we have a similar concern about the possibility that career technical education funds may be flexed. We recognize that career technical education is more expensive. We also recognize that the base funding is what primarily funds career technical education, but that the categorical programs are very important in supplementing those funds. We don't do a very good job in budgeting by mission, and so to the extent that we need to protect these funds to continue the provision of CTE is really important. My final comment is that as we know we're in an era of intense budget shortfall, we need to stick together on issues pertaining to the budget. If we are to advance with recommendations that will divide us, that will become the story, not just on the Student Success Task Force, but also will bleed over into the budget advocacy, and that will not be a good thing for our system. Thank you.
Thank you. Michelle Piatti, Academic Senate. Pilati.
Pilates, like the exercises. We'll actually say it right now.
Okay.
Hi, good afternoon. On behalf of the faculty, I want to applaud you for your thoughtful consideration of the draft 1143 recommendations yesterday. I was concerned that you would be looking at these draft recommendations absent a lot of context, but I thought they were shared with you in a very fair and reasonable way, and you all asked great questions, and that pleased me. Not that I thought you wouldn't, but it was good to see it. It was clear that you appreciated the complexity of the recommendations and the importance of thinking beyond the recommendations to thinking about what would implementation look like. How do you actually make all this work? How do you make all these pieces fit together? As you've heard here, there's some things that people are concerned about, but there's also some things that people think sound pretty good. But as with so many things, the devil is in the details, and we have yet to deal with those details, and we're still looking at draft recommendations. So I hesitate to speak to the recommendations in any specifics because we don't know what those final recommendations are going to look like. And we look forward to those final recommendations and to really playing an active role in their implementation. For the faculty, we have not had a chance to get them up to speed on the recommendations because we don't yet know what they are. But that is going to be a major focus of our fall plenary, and you will be receiving a formal invitation, but I wanted to mention right now that's November 3rd and 4th in San Diego, and I think I've heard you guys say things that make it sound like you like San Diego. And our theme is for the common good. So we're really thinking about what can we do for the common good, and we will be spending a lot of time talking about 1143 and the recommendations and what positions we want to take with respect to them. So I hope you all will put that on your calendars, and we will see you there. Thank you.
Thank you. Logistics. Leslie Smith, Association of Continuing Community Education, Continuing and
Community and Continuing Education. It's the statewide non-credit folks. Good afternoon, President Scott Himmelstein, Vice President Alice Perez, and Chancellor Jack Scott, and Peter McDougall. I'm here to speak to you regarding some of our concerns. The current report as written recommends moving everyone below 2 levels of college level into non-credit, but there's no recommendation that the community colleges in fact deliver that non-credit education. With the closure of the adult schools and the defunding of the adult students in K-12, that would leave nowhere for these students to go. I understand that the issue, the Chancellor has spoken very clearly and supportively in terms of the quality that the community colleges provide in delivering this education and it being the appropriate location and the best location. And the concern has been around funding. Yet there are recommendations in this report that require funding, and funding is not addressed, yet the recommendation is there because it's the correct policy position. We would encourage the Student Success Task Force to step up to the plate as Little Hoover appears. I agree with Vice Chancellor Garcia that it's not definitive, although they have indicated that's the direction they believe. And I think it's not the first time that the recommendation has been to put non-credit or adult education in community colleges. But it's a more important time with over 6 million adults in California who do not have a high school diploma, who graduate with standards that are 8th grade math, that is nowhere close to 2 levels below. So I think it's really our moral obligation, if we care about our most disadvantaged, to step up to the plate and put a recommendation in there that would say that we are, in fact, that it is our mission, it is our clear mission, and we should open our doors to our most vulnerable populations. So with that, just linking into the mission, we really need to step up to the plate on that. Thank you.
Kevin Feliciano, Student Senate, CCC.
I didn't know it was going to be the next one, but good afternoon, members of the board, Chancellor Scott, President Himmelstein. Thank you guys for the opportunity to speak to you today. Like the Academic Senate, the Student Senate has not yet discussed the recommendations from Student Success Task Force, mainly because they're still in draft form. As you could imagine, Student Success Task Force is obviously about the students and how successful we can be in this system without having undue drama or worry from our students. We haven't shared with them the draft recommendations. Once they become available next month at our meeting, we're going to be discussing at length each of the recommendations, and hopefully we can come to you guys at your January meeting and talk to you about what our thoughts are on these recommendations. We are going to do our best to get this out to the field, to the local associated students and the local students at large, to get their opinions on these. There are some controversial issues, if you want to call them that, in the draft recommendations, at least from what I have read. that can have a real significant effect on students, both good and bad. With that said, I feel honored to be the student, the lone student, I might add, on the Student Success Task Force. And though better late than never, I maybe would like to request that perhaps another student be added. No two students are the same. Granted, I've been in the system for a little longer than some other students, but I think the more the merrier in this case, because student success is important not just to the students, but those who teach the students, work with the students, and serve the students. Thank you.
Thank you.
That concludes our public testimony. I know Chancellor Scott would like to respond to a couple of the items.
I have been privileged to attend every meeting of the Student Success Task Force. I have been deeply impressed by the seriousness of the conversation, by the amount of time that people have taken to study these issues, and by the discussions that have occurred. And I want you to know that if you had been present yesterday, it was pointed out that perhaps there were maybe 40% of the recommendations that we had just almost complete consensus on, and maybe 60% needed further discussion. So keep that in mind. For instance, the issue of flexibility. Should there be greater flexibility in the categorical programs? And I appreciate the EOPS testimony we heard today, and we have not taken a formal action on that issue. The reason that we have had people who've come before us who were in favor of flexibility was the belief that local colleges would have a better understanding of what categorical programs would best suit their college rather than us dictating the 10 or 12 or 15 silos and say you must spend this much money on this one, this much money on this one, this much money on this one. We weren't wanting to cut the money, or there was not a suggestion that we cut the total amount of money, but there was a belief that, or at least there was a belief expressed to us. And so we still have to decide that issue. So that's not something that a decision has been reached. And there may be some categorical programs that we feel we wouldn't want to place in a flexible situation. But I said this yesterday, and I want to emphasize this. If we make reforms in California Community College, we will have to take some controversial stands. Otherwise, we will simply have the same community college that we had before we ever started. If there's any room for improvement, somebody's going to get a little excited about any kind of change that we try to make. So just keep that in mind, that we're having to deal with some difficult issues, and so let me make a little clarification. Somebody had a concern about us moving people to becoming full-time students. The only recommendation that was suggested along that line was that when a part-time student seeks student aid, that they be given a sheet of paper that would tell them what they would get if they became a full-time student. Now, all the studies indicate that when somebody's a full-time student, they're far more likely to be successful than if they're a part-time student. We're not saying somebody can't be a part-time student. We just think it might be, some of them might all of a sudden say, well, you know, I didn't realize I would get that much financial aid, and so I can cut back on my work now, and I can go full-time, and it would improve student success, because we know that when people go part-time, things happen in their life, and they don't come they're not going to be generally as successful in completing a degree as a full-time student. So keep that in mind. There's nothing that in this recommendation that will in any way say that you've got to be a full-time student. It was just a suggestion that we might encourage people becoming a full-time student with that sort of thing. Jonathan Lightman said we ought to have more full-time faculty. And one of the things that there is requirements on full-time faculty, and because of the fact that now, Jonathan, you said you were upset over the part-time faculty being gone, and obviously if we hired more full-time faculty, we'd have to give up more part-time faculty. So there's a slight contradiction there, but what I'm trying to say is we know that's a very expensive item. I will guarantee you if the state of California will give us more money, we will be glad to hire more full-time faculty. That's not all of us know that having a full-time faculty force has its advantages over having only a part-time faculty. I think every college probably ought to have some part-time people because they bring a refreshing look from the outside world into a community college. But none of us here are arguing that we need more part-time faculty. This is a financial issue, and when we just took an 8% cut 2 years ago, and we're going to take a 5 or 6% cut this year, I guarantee you that colleges are struggling with this issue. That's not something that they are wanting to do. They're just trying to survive. So let's keep in mind that the issue of funding, we're going to have some issues here that may cause more funding. But, you know, if we were to just come up with some unrealistic recommendations that suggest that the community colleges now receive $5 billion more, we wouldn't get anywhere. So we've got to some way or another be realistic about the state of the California economy. The issue of, another thing, the issue of whether we have 2 levels of basic skills or not has not been decided by this task force. Here's one of the things we realize is that when somebody starts down at the 4th level of basic skills, the possibility of their getting to college English is less than 5%. So something's wrong with our basic skills. If you end up down there, it's the Bataan death march. You don't get to the other. So we were thinking about the possibility of maybe some forms of compression, some forms of contextualization, some forms of acceleration, ways in which some colleges have been quite successful in taking any student who needs remediation and getting them into a compressed, accelerated basic skills and bringing them up to the college level. So it may be that what we will say is that we will create basic skills courses because there's nothing quite as discouraging as to say to a student, you're at the 4th level of basic skills. That means you're going to have to take 4 semesters of basic skills before you can even take college math or college English. Now, if anybody can find me statistics of where that's worked out and been successful, I'd be glad to look at it. But all the evidence that I've found says that doesn't work. In fact, throughout the nation, all community colleges are saying something's wrong with our present remedial education. It's not working. I'm not sure that I'm not a teacher of basic skills, so I'm not saying I've got the answer, but I'm saying we've got to work together to decide some way, somehow, we've got to come up with an answer to this. And one of the answers is, one of the recommendations of the Student Success Task Force is we have greater alignment between K through 12 and through community colleges. When our students graduate, and they can graduate now and pass an exit exam with 8th grade math and 10th grade English, and then when they come and they take one of our assessment tests, they've got a high school diploma, but we know that over 70% of them test too low. So this is a big problem. I don't have the solution, but I don't think the status quo is the solution. I just have to be honest with you. If the status quo were the solution, we could point with a lot of pride to success. But it's much easier if somebody's just one level below. We have pretty good success with those students. But when we get students way down there, we got to do something a little different than what we're doing now. And we understand that. So I just want to put those things out. Number one, remember these are recommendations. Number two, we're not going to please everybody. If we pleased everybody, we wouldn't do anything. We'd just say, let's just take the status quo and stay with it, because that doesn't disturb anybody. But we know that some way, somehow, we want to be more successful. Because I'll say something else. Number one, I'm committed to the fact that the community, college community, faculty, staff, administrators, all of us want to be more successful. And so I don't question that. I don't say that there's anybody here that says, well, I'd like to be a failure. But I am fearful that if we don't take some steps, there's going to be a legislature or somebody else that's going to take some steps for us. And I don't think they know as much about how to cure this situation as we do. I think we know more than they do. And I therefore would suggest that let's be open to looking at this whole issue of student success, and maybe we'll work together. We won't please everybody, but we're doing the best we can, and we've got some really thoughtful people that are working on student success. So be patient. We're going to have a lot of meetings in the next. We're going to the Academic Senate. We're going to the CSSOs, the CIOs, the Community College League, the Student Senate, and the list goes on and on. We're going to have 2 town hall meetings, and you can imagine how many recommendations we're going to get. And then we, in the very best way, after listening to the Board of Governors, then we'll try to come up with a series of 20 to 25 recommendations that will improve student success in California community colleges. And we will hope that those, after working with the Board of Governors, can be approved. Some of them will still be just recommendations. They're going to be just best practices. What does that mean? Well, that just means that you can take it or leave it. Some of them might actually be regulation. Some of them might be legislation. We don't really know. But just keep in mind, they're right now in a draft form. They haven't been vetted through all the processes that we're going to have. And bear with us on the fact that we're going to do the best we can. And we're not going to please everybody, but we're hopeful that we can come up with something that will improve success in California community colleges.
Well said, Chancellor. One more comment, Chairman McDougall.
President Himmelstein, I just want to pick up where the Chancellor left off in terms of the broad-based exposure to these recommendations. And there is recognition that it would be very important to this board to have as broad a distribution of the report as possible. And there will be notification that will be sent to all districts of the website where the report will be contained. Should be accessible to students, should be accessible to faculty, trustees, and anyone else who wants to access the report, with the capability of providing feedback through that system so that their ideas can be included. So that broad-based exposure of the report is certainly something that is planned.
Thank you.